Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of On the Couch with Creatives. I say good morning because I'm here in the UK, but good afternoon or good evening if you're anywhere else in the world. I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Julie Hyde-Mew.
And this is On the Couch with Creatives. Fans and followers of the show will know that we're part of the Creatives Group, the private network for creative professionals across the globe. Together, we help support you so that you can create at your best, connect you with like-minded individuals, and therefore help you grow your creative business and your creative practice. If that sounds like a good idea to you and you'd like to join the growing number of creative professionals in our network, please don't hesitate to reach out to us after the show. But this is On the Couch. So Julie, who do we have on the couch today?
On the couch today is South African author SHILOH NOONE. He's also a radio presenter for Cape Talk Radio and runs a very interesting private museum, which we're going to hear more about. So all the way from the coastal town of Onrust in the Western Cape, here's SHILOH NOONE. Let's get him on the couch. Hi, SHILOH. Nice to see you all the way from South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great honor.
Well, let's start off with what came first, because you have so many arrows to your bow. Excuse the pun, because I know that you own a lot of bows and arrows. But what came first? Being an author, being a radio presenter, being a museum curator. I mean, creatives don't just wake up one day and say, oh, I want to be an actor, or oh, I want to be an author. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, Radio World came first. I was backpacking around Europe, and I ended up on a lot of pirate radio stations. And that was the birth to my Radio World. And eventually it started small with a community radio station to the point that I'm now on national radio. So a lot of my experience with music I share on the radio, some of the stories I share, and it's all really fringe exploration. Everything I share is not really fantasy, but most of it has actually happened to me, which gives it some authenticity, but also questionable in many ways. My true start in the career in terms of handwriting was actually Steve Seegerman, who discovered Rodriguez. I was part of that team, SA Rock Digest. And he said to me, SHILOH, why don't you start? I was writing little articles for him. And he said, why don't you start putting this together and write a book? Now, I couldn't really type that well. You know, there was no Google, no Wikipedia. So it was a very difficult exercise in the sort of mid-90s. And anyhow, finally came to fruition. And my first book, which was ridiculously too big, it was 800 pages. And it did really, really well. I mean, I remember selling 60 copies to foils, cash in hand, which is unheard of in bookshops. But the supply and demand wasn't there. The cost of publishing that book and bringing it over to the UK was just too much. So it was very much a hobby, a work of passion, releasing that book. And then obviously from that point onwards, I started writing books. But I must just clarify, I'm more of a storyteller than a writer. I work on stream of consciousness, which is a nightmare for editors. And I write from emotion. I'm like Quentin Tarantino. You know, he plays a piece of music and then he has an imagery and then he creates a story around it. I'm very similar to that. So I'm not the best of writers. It's more the storytelling that is captivating, which has a degree of authenticity and helps a lot. Yeah, Seeker's Guide to the Rhythm of Yesteryear. It's had 7 amendments. And I've now reached that self-actualization with the book. It's in the hands of many great musicians all around the world. It's been a long process, but a wonderful journey of meeting musicians and sharing the book with them. And the focus of the book was really to share artists that were never given any kind of limelight. They were never given any accolade, that were really remarkable and gifted, talented musicians. So I focused, as much as the icons are there, I focused very strongly on the smaller groups, which I believe needed accolade. And they were so helpful in giving me biographies and so forth. So it was a journey that takes a certain part of my life it was the most incredible experiences that I've had, meeting these people on little railway stations in England, in the north, Portobello Road at a little coffee shop, the Globe in Prague, Shakespeare's in Paris, Amsterdam in a little coffee shop, in Berlin, in some garden, you know, meeting these guys all around the world and then being able to share the correct discography of that particular group. So it is probably the only book in the world that actually firstly gives the full history, autobiography of musicians like Rodriguez and Sean Phillips, and shares intimately about smaller groups. And I have been given so much respect by these musicians. They email me regularly and update me, which is quite emotional. I remember on my 60th birthday party getting emails from David Gilmour of Pink Floyd and Eric Clapton's drummer thanking me for the input into music on my 60th birthday party. I was in tears, you know, because I didn't know these emails had arrived. And of course, there was quite a few people at my birthday party, and the person said, look, this is for real, but I'm not going to share the emails with anybody here, because the one thing about dealing with these famous rock stars, integrity is everything. The respect for their integrity and their privacy is one of the most important things. I've turned down a lot of money due to not attending any interviews and so forth because of the integrity and the privacy of the musician, which I will hold forever.
And then how did you, obviously you were very interested, you were in the music world, and you started off in music radio, pirate radio, music radio. So have you always been in radio since when?
I was largely pirate radio. I was never really given a chance because I was very focused on playing. I didn't want to play rubbish. There's two types of radio presenters in South Africa. One is a radio presenter that works on controversy, comedy, shouting on air or whatever. And then the other is, I was schooled under Leslie Mackenzie, the father of South African radio, and nurtured under the BBC time belt, harking back to an interview many years on the BBC. And I was nurtured under that particular umbrella, the way John Peel presented music, which is a wonderful mentor. So for me, it was all about knowledge, correct English, and entertaining the listener. That world has changed in radio in South Africa. I don't know about that. In England, it seems still they hold the protocol of good English and radio presentation. But in South Africa, that world has changed radically now.
It's a shame. It's a shame, isn't it? You know, you want to entertain your listeners with and give value as well. You want to, you know, give them quality programming.
Well, knowledge for me is everything. To be able to impart knowledge in an interesting way to listeners. I think if you're going to have an airhead on air, that airhead is only going to project to the airheads. You know, Jimi Hendrix said, deep touches deep, shallow touches shallow. And unfortunately, the quality of South African radio at the moment is a bewilderment of shock and controversy and political disorientation. So good radio has fallen asunder very strongly in my country, but it seems to have held its integrity in the UK and various other countries. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. I mean, in our country, you can go from one station to the other and you'll hear the same kind of music on every station, where at least in Europe, you'll hear different genre on different frequencies or different bandwidths or different stations. And I see a lot of your old pirate radio stations have gone legit in the UK, which is wonderful. So you can actually tune into those stations and hear it as it was in the 60s, which is fantastic, you know, Radio Caroline for one. So I'm a big fan of English radio, without a doubt, the way they presented and the way they did things, and understandably, with our history in South Africa being very strongly English, it's understandable that I would embrace that. But obviously, there are a lot of different cultures in this country. and each has its own expression regarding radio. I'm doing a radio show on a Saturday night at 9 p.m. to midnight, which is called The Magic Bus, which is the story and the groove and this behind the story behind the song and so forth. And I have a lot of listeners in the UK that tune in. And I play largely music globally with some South African rock included. And it's been 5 years on the run, which says something for the listenership. I just saw a listenership now from people in a backward town in Australia. It's unbelievable, actually. I've exceeded Magic Radio, LM Radio that closed down in Cape Town. I've exceeded the length of famous radio presenters like Benji Moody. I'm the longest running of my ilk at the moment. And there can only be one reason, but they will never tell me that. And that is simply because I got the listenership. But that's, you don't want to raise the ego of the presenter. You might ask for more money, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, so talk a bit about your other books.
Launched in COVID, the bicycle chess set in African River was my dream African novel. The reviews were fantastic. Actor Jamie Bartlett, who sadly passed away with COVID, he was one of our well-known actors. Lichle Sedaki, one of the top Black empowerment Zulu attorneys in Cape Town. I had fantastic reviews. I will never be able to write a story like that ever again. I put so much into that story, but unfortunately it was launched during COVID. But it still got amazing provenance during that period of time. And just recently, there's been a whole research on that book where Lucia van der Post, the daughter of Sir Lawrence van der Post, actually did a review for the book just recently, having fondly remembered me with my adventures with her dad. And the book has now been launched in America on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Lulu.com, Smashwords, and it's doing really, really well. It's selling consistently. And I'm so happy about that because that book had a lot of my heart in it. Chess teaching, which I'm a chess teacher in African townships, teaching chess to a mission station encompasses all the adventures of wildlife, from leopard to lion to crocodile, but also the gritty truth of Africa, the sadness and the joy. And I balance the two. And anybody who's an expat living in England would love this book. And the story is, of course, Charles, who went on the 1987 expedition into the Kalahari with Sir Lawrence. I did not go on that one. The Land Rovers were taken over by MI6. I think they left from the O'Keefe mine. And he got given a book by Lucia. And apparently he was smitten by the book. He has a great love and passion. I believe it's your king now. Sorry, I tend to forget these things. He had a great love and passion for the San and for the Zulus. It's been a very close thing for him. And he was obviously, Sir Lawrence was godfather to Andrew, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a very close connection. And Lucia, of course, she calls me a darling boy in Africa. She loves Africa. So her review was amazing for the book. And it was so appreciated. I didn't know how it was going to happen that I would actually get her to do the review. I said, "Do you remember me?" She says, "Oh, I can never forget you." And that was quite special, that she was just so supportive. And of course, I managed to get a book to her, hand given to her at her residence in Kensington. And she said she absolutely loved the book from the beginning to the end. Now, that lady takes no nonsense. I think she was the editor on one of the London Financial Times. She's not somebody who's fickle. She's not somebody she calls a spade a spade. And even if she cared a lot about me, if the book was shitty, if I can say that word, she would have said, "Look, it's a great book, but it's personal," or, and for her to actually say this is a great story meant everything to me. So that book has taken a new life in America at the moment. I struggled so much to find a publisher with that book, but eventually I did in South Africa. From there on, I launched a triple whammy, which was a book called The Witches of Sark, which has never seen the light of day on the shelves of England or any other country. A dark Gothic novel and my experiences on the island of Sark in the late 70s. But I did a triple whammy. I did it with a poetry book. Nobody buys poetry books, but anyhow, 42 for the chosen few. But then, of course, a book called Swimming With Salamanders, which is 450 pages, and it's a Roald Dahl twist on every story. 50 tales from the in-between that remain unseen. And that was so in line with my character, because I seem to have this mystical edge wherever I go. And I was able to bring in some lovely hooks into the story, which some gory, some hoary, and some a little bit off the edge, but wasn't Roald Dahl like that all the time. And I've actually, in presently getting a book to his daughter. I'm not trying to follow in his footsteps. You know, I don't believe in walking in another man's shoes, but you'll be surprised. There are not a lot of short stories being written these days. And, you know, we're living in a Coca-Cola society where, especially the youth with cell phones and television, the aspect of reading a book, in our country, only 7% of the country read books. It's a terrible, sad story, and that's the truth. And I did a lot of research around that. So writing a short story is for those that just cannot read. You know, you can be sitting on a station, on a plane, in a train, waiting for the dentist or the doctor, and you can finish the story. And I think that was the key for me, especially the youth of today, that, you know, they just have they've lost a lot of patience. And it's because of the technology of today. Everything is immediate and fulfilling. So I went that route. I thoroughly enjoyed writing those stories because it brought out the best and the worst of me, in terms of these are not African stories. There's stories in the search of the Red Baron, hunting tigers in India in the 18th century, Isolwana, the Zulu War. So every story has a different era or age, which is great. That has been the triple whammy that I launched this year.
Shiloh, talking about your books is magnificent, and I do 100% agree with you about attention span, especially of our youth. I've got a 9-year-old. Trying to get him to read books is a bane of my life. But I'm a video maker and filmmaker, and I'm a very visual person. And you said earlier you're a very visual person. Do you think any of your books will be made into films or TV series? Would you like to see that happen, or would you like to keep the books sacred?
Well, the 50 Tales, the Swimming With Salamanders, the short stories, there is an internet, a Netflix movie series where they have short stories with a twist. So, yeah, it'd be great to get that book to the program manager. But the book that has shown some interest from Warren Batchelor, who did the Reeva Steenkamp movie, but he couldn't get the finance, was to be able to film the bicycle, the African story in South Africa on a game reserve. It really needs foreign currency to do that. And I believe that book on a 3-series television series, 3 parts, would be pretty amazing. And that is why we handpicked, there were some actors that came forward. And one was obviously the chap that I mentioned that passed away with COVID. He was one of our better actors. And I was really hoping for something to happen, but after 3 relentless years of my filmmaker, who's largely a documentary filmmaker, so probably not the right person I approached, I was hoping that that would be something in the realm of Out of Africa or The Ghost in the Darkness, because seeing a lot of Netflix African movies at the moment, it seems to be all Sowetan gangster movies. And I think the people in the world want to see some of Africa. They want to see elephants and lions. They want an African adventure. And this encompasses that. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of books coming out with an African adventure. It's all about the horrors of Joburg and crime. And I was very excited. I felt this is really being fantastical. I felt that this was the triad, the third part. You know, you had Out of Africa, you had Ghost in the Darkness. I felt that this was the third part to that trilogy, which is a wonderful fantasy. but it didn't materialize. But I'm still out there looking for someone who might attempt this. I even arranged a game reserve, complimentary game reserve, to have it filmed on. I have a friend who owns Mount Camdeboo, and still nothing. It's a great dream of mine.
You never know who's watching. You never know who's watching this episode. Somebody somewhere who's got pots of money and a great love of Africa and a good imagination and a good creative mind. You never know.
Well, I do know that Arnold Vosloo, who's obviously, you recall him in The Mummy, it's a well-known South African actor, he was absolutely overwhelmed by the story. He was lying in a hospital bed in California. He said, I want to be in this movie. He's looking for a movie where he's not the bad man, because they always put him in a bad man role. And he told me, Shiloh, if there is going to be a movie, I want to be in it, because it's a story that has meaning and integrity. You know, teaching chess as a missionary at a mission station, and then the children get abducted and they give chase, and how the children teach chess to the abductors, and it softens them. And you get to understand one man's terrorist is another man's hero or freedom fighter. And, you know, when you see the wives of the abductors hugging the children, you have to ponder, but this is crazy. But to them, they're offering those children to a better life instead of starvation in Africa. So there's so much in the story. And along with it, obviously, a touch of, you know, crocodile attacks. The interesting thing is, there's more to it. There was an article in CNN some time back of how children in northern Natal were wading across crocodile-infested rivers to go to high school. So I took that story and I made it real, that in order for this missionary to teach chess at the mission school, he thought he could crisscross with his Land Rover. When he got there, it was impossible. Yet all the children were wading across the river while crocodiles were lying on the banks, on the sand. So he had to do the same. So there's so much more to the story, because those children have to, in Goba, have to come back after school and cross the river while the one watches. And you know, the time to watch crocodiles, having lived in Africa, is the best time is at night, because you can see the eyes on the water. You can see nothing hardly in the day. So there's a very real, factual, historical thing about children going to school crossing crocodile-infested rivers. It was big news in South Africa, in northern Natal. I just took that and included it in the story as one part of many of the adventures that took place. And it's, you know, it ends with the KwaZulu Wars, and traveling with a Land Rover through the KwaZulu Wars, and the elephant blessing of these two elephants rubbing themselves on the Land Rover, and meeting the amphibious people in St. Lucia that live on the rivers that don't touch terra firma. We don't know about this. Our own South African country people don't know there are amphibious people living in this country that don't touch terra firma. They remain on the water and in their huts that float on the water. How many people know that? And this is why I wanted to enhance and highlight some of the beauty of Africa that we don't know about, that is hidden in the crevices of sadness, war, dictatorship. But the beauty and the joy lies there. And anybody who's truly traveled Africa and remains here will tell you that's the reason why I'm still here. It could be some British missionary in the middle of Luanda. And you can't understand why he's put himself in that position until you actually start sitting and talking to him. And he starts talking about the other side of Africa. And that's what I wanted the world to experience. The world sees the ugly side of Africa, the dark side, but they don't see the beauty of Africa. And that's what I wanted to bring about amidst the tragedy and sadness, the great beauty of Africa. A giraffe, for example. I mean, how many people know that it releases enzymes to warn other giraffes if there's danger in the area?
Where does it release the enzymes?
Into the plants.
You mean from their saliva?
Yeah, when they're disturbed. And it's incredible. We know nothing about this. And it's told, I made the font very big so it's easy to read. And it's told like as the missionary talks to the child, and the child asks a question. But don't giraffes ever lie down? and they're able to reach the highest of the trees where all the juicy leaves are. And it's told in a very simplistic manner. But in that simplicity, you realize the wonderful godly nature of Africa and the secrets of Africa that even to this day, I'd say 80 to 90% of South Africans don't know about. I started as an Anglo-Zulu war museum. Then I discovered the Dogon and their mystical connection with a star called Sirius B, and how these people came down and taught them how to farm. A star that they claimed for years, where this particular group called the Noma came to visit them. And that star was only discovered in the late 1800s. And then going into the Maasai and their history, and the Dravidian, why do the Maasai not eat meat? Why do they drink blood mixed with milk? And why do they not eat meat? Because of the influence of the Hindus, the Dravidians that came there. That's why the red ochre is so prominent. And you suddenly start realizing, our own Khoikhoi, which we now call Kwena, that the language is Hindu. Karoo is Korea, dry land. All the words of the Khoikhoi are Dravidian Hindu, because thousands of years they came here and gave that language to that people.
Well, I wasn't aware of that. But the Khoikhoi in the Kalahari have a clicking language. The language is full of clicks. How does that relate to Indian languages?
The Kalahari are the San. They have a click language based from the Nguni heritage. They're a completely different people to the Khoikhoi. The Khoikhoi are based in the Western Cape. The San come from the northern Botswana and Toli Hills and moved down to Clan William and the Karoo. And their history is click language. But the Khoikhoi, as the Dutch said, have a gibberish. And they are the local Kwena of the Cape, largely pastoral herdsmen, not really hunters and gatherers like the San. There's a complete difference. The San have an hierarchy. The Khoikhoi don't have any hierarchy at all. They're a completely different people, and often confused with the word Khoisan, which is a derogatory word because they never intermarried. They were completely different people. If the Khoikhoi intermarried, that would have been with the Boers or the English or the French or the Dutch. The San are a completely different people. And this is now being highlighted very strongly by Zico and world groups, because it's been very confusing. Most people thought Khoisan, what's the difference between a Khoikhoi and a San? There's a massive difference. The fact that one is almost vegetarian, the other is meat eating, it says everything. So yeah, certainly the click language, which was inherited by the Zulus and the Xhosa, that's all Nguni history. But the Khoikhoi, they have a very interesting history that is completely different. And they now called the Kwena, which is their original name. By the way, the San, before was the derogatory word, the Bushman. The San now is also deemed derogatory because it means naked. They were never naked, they had loincloths. So now they are called the Kum. So it's the Kum and the Kwena for political correctness.
Oh, thank you. We learned something on this show.
But you, with your museum, you collect all sorts of artifacts from all over the world, not just from the African tribes.
Correct. Mayan, Celtic, my Irish heritage. I won't tell you where I get them, but we're part of a small group called the Collectors Anonymous, where we believe a lot of the truly valuable artifacts in the museums around the world are not legit, but replicas, while the original artifacts are in the houses of the lords of the manor and wealthy people all around the world. So we are this Collectors Anonymous, we're 3,000 strong, and we try and maintain the integrity of that. And I've numerous times seen that in well-known auction houses and museums around the world.
Do you allow people to view your artifacts in your museum?
On invite. I don't take buses. It's very small, but certainly it's an ICOM registered museum. It's globally acknowledged. It's not just a museum self-created. I've had the French visit me and they were blown away. And yes, I take visitors on request.
So how do people contact you?
They can contact me on my email, which is shilohnoone@gmail.com. I think you've got that email, am I right?
Yeah.
I'm easy to track down. You just Google Shiloh Noone and sooner or later you will find me. I'm on Facebook under my name and surname. It's a great place to contact me. I make friends with everybody because I love sharing. So it's okay to download music because sharing's so nice. So I'm a great believer in sharing.
Oh, it's lovely.
And,
All the
they can
details will be going across the screen now. If you want to connect to Shiloh, listen to his music, listen to his program, the details.
Make a film out of his book.
Make a film out of his book. Yeah, because as you were talking, Shiloh, being okay, I don't have no money. It's not something I could do, but the imagery going through my head, and I'm thinking that would make an epic film or a visual piece. So somebody, please, I know there's people with money out there who could make a lovely production out of this. So yes, I would like to see.
I think with the connection with Lawrence van der Post, it's the magnitude to which a film like that could reach the world is phenomenal. The world has seen enough. They want an African story. They want to see lions and crocodiles. They want to know a little bit more about Africa. And look at the success of Out of Africa, Ghost in the Darkness, about the Stavo lions. That's what people want to know more about. As much as the Anglo period has been criticized strongly, it's a fascinating realm for stories. It's phenomenal. Just going back to the hunting tigers in India, the stories around that. I know they now, obviously, we're in a different time, but the stories around that are phenomenal. And it makes a fascinating movie. We need to know more about our history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want, and I think there are lots of other people who would love to see a really emotional, deep, epic, powerful movie, and not just this commercialized tat that's being put out, or remakes of commercialized tat just to put different people in different roles to be trendy. I won't name any names, but you probably know who I'm talking about. I would love a really good piece of cinema, I guess, a really good piece of cinema that has fantastic cinematography, fantastic story, fantastic acting, something that when you come out of seeing it, you feel like you've left a part of your soul on the screen. We haven't had that for a long time. You're right. It's sort of like, I almost feel like the days of epic movies are almost finished, because you don't see that anymore.
I think Out of Africa brought more people to Kenya than ever in the history of ever before. And there are so many English people that are expats that have lived in Rhodesia and Kenya and Zambia and Tanzania, and their memories of Africa are so vivid. But sometimes you need to just light a spark to remember that elephant standing in that African field, or that roar of that African river, or the galloping of Blow Wildebeest. It's something people want to hear and feel. Because let's be honest, with the way things are going, you're not even going to have zoos left. So where are we going to see these animals in their natural environment? But on the movie screen, because not everybody can travel to Africa.
Okay, let's move on and get to the top tips that you have for radio presenters, aspiring radio presenters.
Okay, that's a difficult one because everybody knows their gift. And, as I said, South Africa is divided into two types of radio presenters. One is a controversial radio presenter who sells on controversiality, shocking people. They know nothing about music. Mine is a different style. I speak about music. I don't really talk too much about the politics of the day, but I share many stories. I think if you are a natural in public, a storyteller, if you have a gift of entertaining people, radio is about entertainment, then I believe you have a gift for radio. You can start off in a community radio station, and then you can move up the ladder. And you never know when your ship may come in. And it could be one story that captivates. And I believe that is, I mean, radio in the past was stories that people had. They didn't have television. So that was a world in itself. You know, people would lie under the blankets listening to music like I did and many others. So radio has become popular again. And I believe if you can tell a good story, that's a good start. That's a very good start. So, yeah, I'd look at that. Look at your natural homegrown talents. Know what your strengths and weaknesses are. If you can't speak well, don't desire to be a radio presenter. Be a writer. People often tend to want to do what they want to do, but test the waters. Speak to people. Say, what do you think of me being on radio? Would you listen to me? Do a voice test. Sometimes people have amazing voices, but on radio, they don't come across too well. Too King's English, too hoity-toity. So you have to test everything. You have to test the waters.
And that's quite easy to do these days with social media, isn't it? You know, you can video yourself or you know, have a podcast or whatever. You know, you can test and see whether people have got an appetite for listening to you these days for free.
Yeah, it's like, you know, writing a book. I remember Calvin, this gay guy that I knew very well. He told me a story, and he told it to me verbatim, how this woman came to him and said, I would like to write a book. And he said, well, let me guess. It's about your wonderful life and your divorce. And she said, how did you know this? And I think it's like a book. If it's going to be something that's vindictive, something that you write in because you want to heal yourself, then you shouldn't be taking it to the public. Unless it has a message for other people. But there are a lot of these self-help books out there. You've got to test the waters in everything. And you're going to get a lot of rejection. And if you're going to worry about rejection, then don't even start. Because you will be rejected. I mean, even going to publishers these days, most of them won't get back to you. The amount of agents listed, some of them don't exist anymore. I know, because my first year I only applied in the UK. Then you get and I'm going to say it, you get publishers like Novum in the UK that are publishers, but they're also acting under a digital approach. And they'll get back to you and say, your manuscript was incredible. This book deserves to be on the shelves in England. All you need to do is give us 500 British pounds, and we will give you this and this. Now, that's the role of a digital publisher. So I think times are so tight that a lot of the mainline publishers have a division that's digital. They need cash flow. So they rely on the exuberance and the money and just the dream that writer wants his story out and is willing to pay 400 British pounds. But nobody tells you about how difficult it is to get the book into the bookshops. That bookshops don't deal with authors, they deal with vendors, and you need a distributor. They don't tell you that. They say they'll give you posters to market your book. It's knowledge. Find out what genre the publisher deals with, or the distributor for that matter. And even then, don't be broken if you don't get a reply.
It's that time in the show, Julie, where we're going to do our values jam.
Right. Now, Shiloh, this is a little game that digs into your psyche. Nothing scary. You're going to pick a card, and Melanie is going to tell you which value you've picked, and you are going to discuss that value. And basically, there are no right or wrong answers. You just say what comes into your mind, because you're a creative person, and pictures and all sorts of things will come in, will be triggered by this particular word that you pick. So just say the first thing that comes into your mind.
We're going to ask you creatively, because we're creatives here. Julie and I always say this is the on the couch part of the on the couch. We're going to get inside your mind. Okay, I'm going to fluff out my cards here. I'm going to roll my finger along the top of my cards. You just yell stop and we'll pick a card.
Stop.
Right in the middle. Okay, what did we pick? Ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Very good for the topic that we've been discussing, I think. Anyway, you picked excellence, the value of excellence. So, Shiloh, what does excellence mean to you? What does it look, feel, and sound like?
Excellence.
Mm.
For me, it's being real to the nature of yourself and expressing that and not trying to be somebody else. That is for me everything. The true value of your soul expressed to people so they know who you are.
Yeah.
And if you can be in that level, you can achieve anything. If you can just be who you are, that for me is excellence.
Yeah, I like that.
What does it smell like?
Beg your pardon?
What does it smell like?
Blue.
Blue. The color blue has a smell.
Yes, it does. It's a spiritual
Okay.
color. Has an aura to it. It's
Absolutely.
a transient smell of calmness. It's sedate, and it makes one feel almost connected beyond the physical.
I like that. I like that. I like that. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to ponder on that more because I like that. That's very profound. I like the smell of blue. I feel a book coming on, Julie. I think I could write a book, Smell of Blue. I've been inspired. I've been inspired.
Yeah, it's been wonderful talking to you on the couch, Shiloh. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts, which have been absolutely fascinating. And all the best with books of the future, and hopefully we'll see your book on the big screen soon.
Oh yes.
Well, thanks to you guys. If it happens, you'll have to get me back onto the couch.
Yes,
absolutely.
we would. Absolutely. Trailers galore. Absolutely. I would love that. Thank you, as Julie said, Shiloh, so much for taking the time to speak with us today. It's been tremendous. Thank you, Julie, my co-host, and thank you to our lovely, lovely viewers for tuning in, and we hope you've enjoyed it. But until next time, we'll see you.